Bentley here. Good evening to you. On behalf of the Calgary Climate Hub, I welcome you to A Climate of Change, the Hub's live cast exploring with thought leaders from across North America what these wildly unprecedented times mean for addressing the climate crisis here in Alberta and how to create the fast, fair, and impactful change we need. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy. Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Yaxi Nakota Nations, the Métis Nations of Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. I'd like to make a second land acknowledgement on behalf of another group of folks that have a stake in this land that we stand on today, and that is our children, our nieces and nephews and grandchildren, and all future generations. I urge you to keep them in mind during this time as we face unprecedented change and start making decisions about what comes next. I want to thank our sponsors for making tonight's show happen. That's Skyfire Energy, Go Electric, Radical Balance, and Solar Homes Incorporated. A little bit more about them later on. But on to the show. It's no longer academic. Both the climate emergency and global energy transition is upon us and will dictate the terms for the economic successes and failures of every country and level of society for the next several decades, whether we like it or not. So why not absolutely love it? According to the Alberta Energy Transition Report commissioned by Calgary Economic Development, the global energy transition could create 170,000 jobs in the provincial clean tech sector and contribute $61 billion to our GDP within 30 years. That's nothing to sneeze at. 170,000 new clean tech jobs for Alberta brings with it an influx of cutting-edge new businesses, entrepreneurs, and head offices for a Calgary downtown that desperately needs it. For some time, Calgary and Alberta have been rightly bemoaning the steady exodus of our youth that don't feel like there's a place for themselves here anymore. I don't know for sure, but I feel like Alberta becoming the net zero capital of Canada, and why not the world, with Calgary becoming its head office, may very well be one of the things that can start reversing that flow. If Calgary becomes the place to go for young people to work on climate in Canada, then that's us securing our future and prospering in a global climate transition that isn't just coming, but is already upon us. It doesn't happen by accident or luck. It's only by design and smart leadership. We have a well-established history of finding brand new ways of provisioning energy in this province and city, as well as attracting talent and workers from across the country and indeed the world to get it all done. We can do it again. We must do it again, or we fail the moment and our future. So come on, Calgary. What do you say? Let's win. Many a fine renaissance have been built on far less than this. Our guest today is Calgary Economic Development's Energy and Environment Development Manager, Chris Brown. Chris, welcome to A Climate of Change. I'll get you to flick on your camera when you're able. And welcome to the show. We're very happy to have you on, Chris.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
So I guess the first, it was a big story when it hit, when the word got out about, the prosperity that's coming to Alberta with the clean energy revolution that's coming our way. What maybe I'll just turn it over to you, and you can give us a little bit of an understanding of what the report has to say.
Yeah, that would be great. And obviously, thank you very much for having me. Thank you for the opportunity to share the results and outcomes of the study. And I think it should be probably coming up to everyone, hopefully, very soon. And maybe let me know if it's not the case.
That's good.
Yep, great. So, and maybe just if you don't mind, before I dig into that energy transition study, I always try and share our community built strategy called Calgary and New Economy. And for anyone out there that isn't aware of it, it was built in 2018 by Calgary Economic Development, or in partnership with Calgary Economic Development. And in 2021 and early part of 2022, we did put a lot of effort in to really pressure test that community built economic strategy. And we adjusted the vision statement a bit. But for me, it's really inspiring. So, and I think it's aligned with a lot of the conversation that'll be today, but it's really for Calgary to be the place where bright minds and big ideas come together with an unmatched spirit to help solve global challenges. And for me in energy and environment, certainly, I can't think of a more important one than climate action. When we look at key drivers or focus areas of our organization, it's talent, innovation, livability, business environment, and then brand and reputation. So I just offer that to the panelists, yourself, Steve, and the audience to think about as we go through this conversation. So on to the study. And certainly it is my sincere pleasure to share some of those outcomes. I'd like to thank our project partners before I get started, Edmonton Global and Prairies Camp, for their kind of contribution and support, the project consortium team for all their hard work, of course, Delphi Group, Cleantech Group, and Foresight Canada, and then our advisory committee, who came in at a number of different times at key milestones to kind of be a sounding board, make sure that we were reflecting the results in industry and certain other ecosystem voices. So I wanted to share where some of our minds were at in Q1 2021 when we were thinking about Calgary and Alberta and the energy transition. So personally, I was convinced there was a very sizable opportunity for our community through the energy transition, but it was difficult to get a sense of where we were sitting and really what that opportunity and future looked like. Certainly I was there saying, hey, the energy transition, it's going to be big, but what does that mean? Who am I to say it? So as we thought through that process, these are some of the questions we were asking ourselves, and at a very high level helped to establish a framework for deliverables in the study. I think for today, with the time I have, I'll touch on the ecosystem just lightly, the opportunity lightly. I know, Steve, you mentioned a lot of the really key important outcomes of those economic models, really fantastic news for us to share. A little bit on the leadership potential. And in the comparison part, I just won't get to. There's a very heavy, really robust benchmarking process we went through. So it's fantastic. And I encourage everyone to kind of dig into the report to find out some more information about that. But looking at the ecosystem, and as well, not only in benchmarking, but in the ecosystem, there's a lot of, plenty of insight related to that at large in the report. So I'll just focus on a few highlight key facts. Just for your knowledge and context, there's about 137,000 Albertans that work in the clean tech sector. So that's direct and indirect jobs. About 14,650 people are directly employed in clean tech ventures. So out of those people and those ventures, 51% are led by first-time founders, 28% are founders that were born outside of Canada, and 22% of ventures have a female founder, Now, certainly we'd love that number to be higher, but compared to the national average of 15.6%, we're doing pretty good. And I know when I look at those stats, what they say to me is that if you have a great idea, no matter where you are in the world, you can come to Calgary, build that idea, and be successful in our ecosystem. Now, a big part of understanding our ecosystem is really around that clean tech inventory that takes stock of support organizations and accelerators and incubators and maybe financial arms. But also when we put this work in on the inventory, it gave us a sense for the number and type of companies that exist in our community today. So think in your head, roughly 1,000 companies in the clean tech ecosystem in Alberta. 465 of those companies are headquartered in Calgary, 426 in the Edmonton metropolitan region, and 54 companies are headquartered outside of those two major urban centers. That's what we uncovered in the study. I'm convinced that if we spend more time on it, we'd uncover more companies. And one caveat, it's just a snapshot in time. But out of that whole inventory group in that clean tech space, the top leading subsectors are digitalization, renewable energy generation, waste management, and water efficiency and wastewater treatment. The target markets of our clean tech companies are driven by oil and gas, power and utilities, manufacturing industries, and ag. Calgary is also well positioned with our top talent to continue to build a robust inventory of clean tech companies through the energy transition. We're a leader in STEM grads among major Canadian cities. We're also a top tech talent market in North America. We're second in Canada as bang for your buck tech ecosystem. And most recently, we were named top 30 clean tech ecosystem out of 280 cities by Startup Genome. So lastly, our community continues to invest and build an innovation ecosystem that will help expand this list of companies that call Calgary its home. Now, a little bit onto the opportunity, and this is what I'm very excited about. And like I mentioned at the beginning, something that's impactful. And for me, I really do believe this is the first time anyone's tried to quantify that economic opportunity in the energy transition on a net zero pathway for Alberta. Certainly, you would get North American numbers in worldwide scenario planning. You might get US, you might get Canada. It's really rare to get Canada, and it's of course even rarer to get something like Alberta. So on a net zero pathway, Alberta is expected to create significantly more jobs and contribute significantly more to our annual GDP than a business as usual case. So by 2050, on a net zero pathway, 170,000 more clean tech jobs and 61 billion more in annual GDP will be expected versus business as usual. But this forecast does not come without some challenges. So the study's modeling found that to capitalize on the clean energy transition, Alberta will need to collectively invest more than 2.1 billion annually in the clean tech sector by 2030, with this amount increasing to 5.5 billion by 2040. So that's collectively. So it could be venture capital, it could be scale up investment, it could be government investment, all sorts. On the talent side, according to the study, the imbalance of job seekers over openings is 5,085 or 7.2% in 2025. But by 2030, the imbalance will have declined slightly to 1,713 or 2.3%, which is a fairly tight labor market. So, and in certain subsectors in the report, it'll note that, ones like carbon capture, utilization, and storage might be even in the negative. So making us think about where our talent and where our workforce needs to be by the end of the decade. So this suggests that there's a ready and willing labor force for clean technology development in Alberta today, but certain technology development like CCUS might face significant job shortages by 2030. So where can we be a leader? Now, in this report and through the kind of process, we put together a fairly robust prioritization matrix. I believe it was 15 different categories that we weighted and scored across, I believe, 16 subsectors in energy transition. Now, that's all in the report, so maybe don't quote me on it, but really 6 bubbled up to the top. It's ag tech and agriculture, carbon capture, utilization, and storage, digitalization, electrification, energy efficiency, and then hydrogen production and utilization. So I'm sure many of these we've heard of in the mainstream, talking about by governments and other ecosystem actors. Certainly CCUS, digitalization, and hydrogen, I would expect to be quite popular. Out of those 6 subsectors, from a calculated average growth rate, a CAGR between now and 2030, the most attractive ones are CCUS and digitalization. Digitalization growing by 24%. And I would say that in our Calgary community, we've seen a lot of great news stories around that digital transformation space, helping to support that growth path. So I'll close with just some quick look at some key recommendations out of the study. While the opportunity is abundantly clear in my mind, and I'll remind you, 170,000 jobs, 61 billion more in annual GDP by 2050. There's plenty of work to be done if we're to capture those economic benefits. The study lays out a number of key recommendations for our regional and provincial community. I encourage everyone to download the Alberta Energy Transition Report on Calgary Economic Development's Energy and Environment sector page. Get into the depth of content, and in particular, contemplate how might I contribute to advancing and supporting these key recommendations. So thank you very much for the time to present this study. I look forward to the discussion and working with our community to maximize our potential in the energy transition on a net path to net zero. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for that thorough presentation. I didn't give you a whole lot of time, and there's a lot of information there. I know it's not, so it's actually easier to do a longer presentation than a shorter one when you've got the sort of information available to you that you have. I guess my first question would be, how with Calgary's mayor declaring a climate emergency and the climate strategy getting through, how critical is it that the city is making those moves while you're looking at these opportunities that are coming at us?
Yeah, and Steve, I want to check that you can hear me, because there's some tech inside.
I can hear you.
Can you at least hear me?
We've got a little bit of a bit of a garble / delay, but let's see what, maybe give us another try here. I'll just reframe the question. Recent moves from our city council, including declaring a climate emergency and passing the climate strategy. How critical do you think that is to what you're seeing with these numbers coming out of your report?
Yeah, I'll give you another try, Steve. Can you hear me? I can hear you.
So I can hear you as well. I think your screen is frozen, maybe.
Yeah,
but
it is.
If all we have is audio.
On question, if you can hear me, and it's kind of a message, and then I think I'll answer the question. I'll shut down Zoom and join again. So I apologize, Steve, but sure. Of course it would happen while we're recording, right? But so yeah, I've been very, very outspoken about how important it is to set net zero targets, how important it is to have a climate strategy, because when we're competing in this space, we're competing against you, and essentially it is table stakes to have net zero targets and climate strategies today. Yeah. Now, my assessment in 2012, when, without doing deep research on it, admittedly, but my assessment when we set 80% GHG reductions in 2012 from a city community perspective, that was progressive, right? We were ahead of the curve in comparison, but we've allowed ourselves to be laggards. So it was absolutely critical for us to take a stronger position on climate action and really to catch up to the rest of the world, catch up to what industry is doing and what, if frankly, the mainstream is expecting of us. So with that, I will just log out and log back in and hopefully continue our conversation. Sorry, Steve.
Sure, sounds good. When something like this happens, it's just as easy for me to get out and say a few words about my sponsors. So that's what I'll do while we're waiting for that to happen. First up, a longtime sponsor has been Skyfire Energy, who have been leaders in Western Canada when it comes to solar power for over 2 decades now. And when you think about getting into solar power as a business now, that's one thing, but to have the vision 20 years ago that Skyfire has had, that's really something. And they continue to provide leadership. And what I would say is we need them more than ever now that we are heading into exactly the sort of clean tech expansion that we're talking about here today. So that's Skyfire Energy. I'll also quickly mention Solar Homes Incorporated, your net zero home renovations experts right here in Calgary, Alberta. Invest in your future, lower your emissions, renovate with return. They have operators standing by and ready to book a quote for you and on your home, so you can get a home that you are happy to live in and start to save some money on. I also want to thank Radical Balance, who wants to know, are you ready to bring planet positive solutions to your business? Financial and environmental sustainability is possible, and Radical Balance wants to prove it to you. And finally, I'll just mention Go Electric, who is another sponsor of ours, the exclusive provider of used electric cars and plug-in hybrid vehicles for Calgary and beyond. When you think about where we're at in electric cars, a lot of people would like their next car to be an electric car, but it's still kind of expensive. Might be that the nice sweet spot is go and get yourself a used one. And what I can tell you is one of the Calgary Climate Hub's co-chairs went to give an electric car at Go Electric a test drive, and they left with the thing, and they love it. And so I encourage you, if you're in that spot where you're trying to figure out how you can get into an electric car sooner than later, but you want the price to come down, this might be the thing for you. So that's Go Electric. They do some great work. And then finally, I guess while we're waiting to see if we've lost Chris forever or whether he's coming back on us, I'll just let you all know that we're proud to announce that we have a new podcast up and running called The Climate Lens that will help you see how all the big stories of the day have climate at their heart in some capacity. And we link back to local level climate action and how you can make a difference. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Please subscribe, like, and share far and wide. I can tell you we've got one episode up so far, and the first one's the toughest, and we'll just keep going till we've got a steady stream of the things. Okay, do we have, has Chris found his way back yet? I am not seeing him yet. Okay, well, you know what? Maybe who wants to jump in and take a question or two? Well, you know what? Maybe I'll. There's Tim Lip. He's jumping in here. So, Tim, you've got a bit of a background in as a clean tech entrepreneur. You've got some stuff that you're kicking around there. What are some of the sorts of things that when you hear Chris talk about all of this opportunity, and I know that a big part of when you're there, we're talking about this prosperity for Alberta, like the head offices would all be here, and what sorts of things would you want to see this city provide to make being a clean tech entrepreneur here easier?
First of all, thanks so much for the opportunity to be here. I'm really excited about this. I think I was taking a lot of notes during his presentation, and I think there are some things I think for an entrepreneur that I'd like to see. But the first thing, like probably the biggest thing that really jumped out at me was how this initiative kind of impacts inequality in the city as a whole. Because that's the biggest thing that the biggest concern I see with climate action is it can very easily become a tool to accelerate inequality if it's not done correctly, just because of the scale of the problem we're trying to solve. It's so easy to put systems in place that are inaccessible to loads and loads of people.
Right. So, yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because my next question was really about just transition and stuff like that before we lost our guest in this case. But I think that's something certainly that we've got to be vigilant of, and I think we have to make sure that this just doesn't become another playground for the rich. This is just something that that it's an opportunity for the richest people in the world to just get richer on, because if we don't have full buy-in across the system, systemic buy-in, it's a systemic problem, and we just won't get there. We'll fail, right?
Yeah. So that's probably the biggest thing. I'm curious to see what other panelists think, though. I've got a very peculiar background and perspective, so I would love to hear other people's perspectives.
Yeah, fair enough. It looks like we've got Chris back. Let's see if his system's working there. We had an interview back in the early days where I had City Councillor Drew Farrell on, and we didn't know what to do, and I just sort of gave the local climate news while she's trying to work out her system, and it all kind of went sort of seamlessly, and at least to my eye. So, anyways, that's live radio, folks. That can happen from time to time. How you doing there, Chris?
Good. Obviously keeping you on your toes, I guess. But I'm back and hopefully no more issues. So.
Right. It takes a little bit of mental gymnastics sometimes, these things, but we're here now. So okay. So you were mentioning a couple of things about how this affects Calgary. Another question I have for you is what are some of the industries that you think are really going to benefit from this transition that maybe we don't think of? Clean tech comes to us right away, and I always think about this whole thing is going to have to be built, a brand new way of doing just about everything. And so to me, that's construction, that's engineering, that's boots on the ground, that's a whole bunch of things. Are there some industries that you look at and you feel like, hey, how come you guys should be excited about this?
Yeah, well, in fact, like when you look at, I think that what drives our value proposition in some of those big subsectors like carbon capture, where we expect mega projects, because that's something that we understand in Alberta. Yeah. We have a long history of executing mega projects. We have the talent, we have the expertise. So it's something we're very comfortable with doing here in Alberta. So to your point, I would expect, those industries to welcome, these opportunities. One of the key recommendations in the study, there's really 4 I hear all the time, no particular order: venture capital investment, strong and consistent climate policy, first customers, and then future talent. And in some of those areas, I think it's the strong and reliable climate policy that's really, put the brakes on some of these investments. But to answer your question, I think major projects, absolutely. I think everyone's welcome to that. I think other ones that not even surprised me, but that surprised me that bubbled up as much as it did was ag tech and agriculture. Yeah. That one I did not expect to land in the top 6. But it was, when you think about it, of course, energy and energy transition and decarbonization has a big role to play in there. And because of where the ag industry in general fits today, it's a fantastic opportunity because there's even much, a larger leap that they can make. And it's not just about, say, improving yield or improving energy efficiency. It's really about just getting that ag tech innovation, right? So a specific sliver of, say, digital tech innovation and hardware innovation. So it's a really cool. I mean, agribusiness sector is forecast to invest, I think, $246 million in digital transformation by 2024 in Alberta. So that's those are big dollars from I would say a traditionally non-digital leaning industry. So it's ripe for disruption, ripe for innovation.
Absolutely. And I feel like I'm glad you mentioned that. Well, of course you would, because it's one of the key findings or one of these key industries. But I feel like, agriculture and rural Alberta, there seems to be a lot of pushback on climate. But I go back to Project Drawdown quite a lot. And the number of solutions that have to do with land management and drawing down CO2 that rural people are going to be, or rural areas are going to be able to accommodate. And I feel like at some point the Canadian government is going to be asking, with money in their hand, for rural Albertans to take up these ways of doing things in order to help Canada meet its goals.
Yeah, I'd say anecdotally, I've heard the conversation shift where, maybe there'd be rural resistance for a large solar project in certain areas. I would assume with the concept, well, hey, that's going to displace our traditional oil and gas operations or something like that. But, again, anecdotally, I'm hearing that there's a lot more acceptance and willingness for those projects because it's a good tax base for the rural community. It gets job skills, some good jobs with it. Of course, with wind as well would be the same case. With budget 2022, there's, I think, $2 billion set aside called the Futures Fund. So that's specifically armed at upskilling future talent in, I believe it's upskilling oil and gas talent for future emerging sectors and industries. I believe that's kind of what it's earmarked for. I believe it's only aimed for Newfoundland, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and I would expect that Alberta would get the majority of that. So I'm excited for those kind of initiatives to come through because that talent piece and that rural community needs those kind of transition support.
So while you were having to perform some kind of voodoo to get back onto the screen here, I was chatting with Tim Lip, who's got a bit of a background in clean tech entrepreneurialism and a few other things. One of the things we were talking about was just about the concept of ensuring that that this transition is a just transition and that we're not leaving groups that have historically been left behind again, that this isn't just a playground for the rich, because if it does, then you don't get system-wide buy-in, and that's what we need for a full systemic shift. That's the scope of the problem. So given your position and your reading of that report, how do we make sure that we don't make the same mistakes that we've historically made?
Yeah, and it's great. And I'm certainly not an expert in that area and that area around policy. But what I can say, which is really comforting, is I think every workshop or, kind of like social innovation group that I've been involved in has a strong theme of energy poverty, energy equity that kind of cross cuts through it.
Yeah.
So it's a consideration right from the beginning. And I've always been so impressed, and certainly I'll give a shout out to Energy Futures Lab when they assemble the group of stakeholders and they make sure that some of those voices are there. And of course, I think always they could say, hey, we could get more voices and better representation, and it's always going to be something that we can strive for. But I think in particular, Energy Futures Lab does a fantastic job of getting the right people in the room that have expertise on energy poverty and energy equity and stuff like that. So it's in the conversation. So that's the part I think is really encouraging.
Yeah, you know what? The first thing that I always the exercise that I try to make is, and I didn't create this. This is out there. This is what people should be doing. Is just look around that table and try to see who isn't there, and then find a way to make sure that everybody that should have a seat should have it that actually has a seat. Okay, I'm going to hit you up with one more question before we go to our panel. Just with sort of with current events going on, America just passed the biggest climate bill that it's ever passed. It's about to do more on climate than it's ever done. We also know that a big reason why solar went down the way that it did in cost was China spending a whole lot of money in 2017, 2018, I want to say. It seems like everything clean tech is about to go way down in cost for customers, and it seems like we can expect a big boom in all of this climate work. What do you think? How does that affect the report that you've given out? And like when you saw that news coming in, how did you feel? Like, okay, well, this affects Calgary like so?
Yeah, well, I'll maybe answer that a couple different angles. So, in terms of renewable energy, and there's a specific call out in the report. It didn't make into the top subsectors, and if I sidestep for a second in my role, that I think that's okay. Our renewable energy story is a much easier one to consume and talk about, right? But that forecast for Alberta is fantastic. Like I say all the time, Alberta once again is blessed with these amazing natural resources now in solar and wind, comparable to high solar and renewable penetration countries like Germany and Netherlands. We got even better resources in some cases. Yeah. So, solar is expected to grow by 20 times. Wind is set to triple. By 2025, Alberta should have the largest install base in capacity terms of solar and wind by 2025, 2026. That's what the forecast is showing in Canada, right? So that already was looking great, I think. I don't think I understand the fundamentals in terms of, the supply chain of solar panels and wind. I mean, certainly the cost reductions were insane. It's like 78% over, a 2-year period with solar panels with 2018 that you referenced. I hope, like you say, that continues. I don't know how much more it can continue. I'd like to see the industry increase efficiencies, and maybe higher efficiency panels are the ones that are manufactured in North America. One of the first thoughts I had when that passed, it's like almost a dual thought. From a climate action perspective, it's fantastic, right? The US obviously represents a big piece of that carbon footprint worldwide. I look at reports, the PPM keeps going up, right? On a year-on-year basis. So it's, we're not really making enough progress, I think. And I think a lot of people would agree. So I think a big milestone investment like this is great to see. I think the jury's still out on how that fits, or does that take away from opportunity in investment in Canada? Because at the end of the day, the US market is that much bigger. I mean, it's a magnitude bigger in population, so it has a magnitude bigger in government incentives too. And that's usually what I see. So it could affect us. I think from an economic engine and a community building perspective, I think our best success pathway is to build those companies here, right? And serve a local industry. So I think that doesn't change that much. It's then how do we, and coming back to one of those key recommendations, how do we efficiently still attract venture capital and scale up investment into our community and our ecosystem to help build those companies? So I think that would be the one space that, we might be a second in line now to the US, for example, right? Or the attention might be drawn to the US in the short term.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, you know what? I said that was the last question, but I got one more. I got to make sure I ask this. When I was reading your report and I realized that, okay, I'm going to bring this person on my show and we're going to talk. I mean, as I'm reading about it, I'm thinking about bringing you on. I'm as I mentioned to you on the phone when we were talking earlier, it seems like we're walking in the same direction towards the same goal here. And by that, I mean you and I, but also Calgary Climate Hub and Calgary Economic Development. We want Calgary to be leaders in the net zero transition. We want to prosper here. We want our city to grow in the right ways around this transition and not get left behind. And I guess so the key question that I would ask is, how can our two organizations synergize and help each other along the way? If we were on a quest to slay the same dragon, then we would come up with a plan and figure these things out and work together. So what sticks out to you in ways that perhaps the Calgary Climate Hub could help Calgary economic development in this capacity?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's a function of understanding opportunities, and I think maybe by default, or because I'm an optimist, I think people gravitate towards hope and opportunity a lot more. I think my assessment is a lot of knee-jerk reactions are based in fear, right, and not understanding what's happening. So I think with net zero climate strategy, with all the work and progress that's happened in the last 18 months, and what I expect to happen in the following 18 months, I think there'll be a lot of great stories to tell and highlights. And maybe I mentioned this to you, Steve, I can't remember, but I get the sense that our broad community in Calgary, only now, like in this quarter, has woken up to the fact that we can innovate and be successful outside of oil and gas. Like only now. Of course, we've been able to do it for decades, but only now I think we actually believe it. So I think that's a great thing. And so the more we can, reinforce that and propagate that and grow that belief, I think the better it's going to be.
Yeah, well, that gives me an excellent opportunity to mention that the Calgary Climate Hub did some polling in the lead up to the municipal election with our prime goal of making sure climate was in the debate halls and on the ballot in some capacity. So we did some polling, and it turns out that Calgarians, a strong majority of us, understand that the transition is coming and here. They think we can prosper from it, and they think we should be leaders on it. Yeah. And so, when you ask Calgarians the right questions, you end up hearing good things like this. So it seems like there's a lot of, and I think you're right. I think this is a newer thing. I think if you had asked that prior to COVID and prior to, with oil and gas having gone through what it's gone through, we all learned a few things. So there's a lot of reasons to be excited about all this stuff, and it seems like we were all starting to get it. I want to go on to our panel here. While you were gone, Chris, by the way, I ran through my sponsors, so we were able to cut right ahead on all that stuff. So that's what you do when you have a breakdown like that. So what I'll do is I'll introduce our panelists. I'll get you to turn your cameras on as I do. First up, I want to introduce Tana Boonlert. He's the lead coordinator for the Protect Our Winters Calgary chapter. So that's POW, Protect Our Winters. He's also a senior manager for methane reductions projects at ANU Climate. So hi there, Tana. Thank you so much for coming out. Romy Garrido is a former Calgary City Council staffer and now a campaign director for Point Blank Creative, an advertising agency that builds winning campaigns with powerful progressive partners. We also have Tim Lipp, who is a digital integration strategist at Think Tech, and a budding clean tech entrepreneur. I think we can say budding, right, Tim? Does that sound right?
I've already budded, now I'm out of it. Budded and burst.
All right, fair enough. And then finally, Sustainable Calgary's board member and very much an active transportation champion and leader here in Calgary, Brett Berger. And actually, I want to start with Brett just because, when we're talking about all of the opportunity and prosperity and in transitioning, often we talk a lot about electrification. We talk a lot about cars, but we don't talk as much about active transportation and cycling. I wanted to make sure, as I mentioned earlier, Brett's is one of the voices that has been speaking loudly and clearly on this topic for some time. So I wanted to give you a chance to lead off there, Brett.
Thanks. I think you're right. We don't see the emphasis on active transportation, and it's an area where Calgary stands to gain a lot. We know, your audience would know that 30% of Calgary's GHGs are from transportation, or just specifically the burning of fossil fuels or gasoline and things like that. And so that represents a huge opportunity to make gains against our carbon footprint. If we create the conditions to allow more people to choose bicycles to get around, to replace car trips with bike trips, and also extending as well to how people are mobile on their own feet, as an example. There's much about Calgary's sidewalks and intersections and so on that create all kinds of barriers for people who want to be mobile on foot in the city. So as an example, every day in Calgary, on average, there's one pedestrian that's struck by a motorist. Half of those are in crosswalks. So it does start to illustrate a problem that we don't have the conditions that enable people to feel safe. We've all had that experience where we're at a crosswalk and there's a car, obstructing the crosswalk because they're trying to turn right on red, as an example, or they just didn't stop behind the stop bar. That creates an intimidating scenario because then you're looking for the driver's eyes to make sure they see you before you step out in front of that vehicle. And it doesn't take, a collision to prevent somebody from choosing to walk, right? It's just enough microaggressions, enough close calls that creates the conditions for somebody to say, you know what, I'll just drive.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing I was thinking about when I was looking at Chris's report is, when we're talking about building all these new tech hubs here in Calgary, you have to lure a workforce here. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that's tried, tested, and true, if you will, is you build the active transportation networks. That's something that a workforce appreciates, right?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we see in the data now that people are getting their driver's licenses later. There's a growing population of people who just aren't getting their driver's licenses at all. So they're looking for other modes to move around the city. And particularly the tech space. I just read an article recently in Avenue Magazine about the Innovation District. And so there was some emphasis in that article as well about people, wanting to move around through the greater downtown area between the Beltline and the Innovation District, as an example. By scooters and by other micro modes, right? We also see those single wheel devices that people just stand on and really fly through the streets, becoming incredibly efficient for getting around the city, space efficient. You can carry it up to your office and secure it there, as an example. So lots of really attractive ways of getting around the city that don't require an automobile. And I think younger people, the kind of talent that we need to bring into the city and recruit into the city are looking for those types of options, but also the infrastructure that goes along with it, right? To be mixing with cars and to just be a vulnerable road user without any protection isn't an attractive environment to help people consider those options. And that's what we need to close the gap on, is not just creating a network of protected infrastructure, but building in that redundancy as well. We're running into issues now in the downtown where we're seeing on a very local level, like closures of the cycle track because of necessary construction. But because there isn't redundancy built into the system, the detours, if we get them, sometimes we don't, but they can be very cumbersome and also dangerous. And so less attractive for families, as an example, moving through the downtown with small children. All those considerations come into play and again, create conditions where relying on a bicycle all the time to move around becomes less attractive because you can't always rely on the network to be reliably open for you.
Right. Absolutely right. I want to open this up to the full panel shortly, but I actually do want to hone in on with Romy for 1 second here. Romy, as a person that runs these campaigns, and also we mentioned it in the pre-chat there, she was the first person that I heard articulate that politicians don't lead parades; they jump in front of them when the parades are ready to go, kind of thing. She probably said it way more articulately than I did, but it strikes me that maybe this whole thing needs a campaign. There still is some resistance to jumping in with both feet and really making Calgary a leader. Do we need some kind of a campaign?
I mean, you're asking a campaigner, so I'm going to be biased, but yeah, absolutely, we need a campaign. If we look at the past and not too long ago, a lot of the things that we enjoy today, like the 8-hour workday, maternity leave, same-sex marriage, right? Those things were won because people got together, they chose a side, they even decided to pick a fight, which is bold and sometimes scary, and they campaigned. And sometimes it took many, many years. It took a lot of literally blood, sweat, and tears, depending on the context. But I think what we have that gives us hope is not just evidence of those things being one, but also we can look at public opinion and how it's changed over time. Specifically on climate, it's come up in this conversation. People really do change their opinions depending on how much, those ideas are being propagated and repeated over and over again. They become a bit more mainstream and folks start thinking, okay, I hear this quite a bit. The repetition just starts to sink in. And eventually, they're kind of parroting some of those good ideas that we're putting out there. So yeah, absolutely. In short, we definitely need to campaign on this.
So if there was one thing that we could start doing almost right away, and maybe it's the hub, or maybe it's the hub and Calgary Economic Development, or what have you, if there's one thing that we could do to get started, what do you think that would be, other than hiring your firm?
I mean, yeah, we can talk about that later, but right. So there's no silver bullet, unfortunately. That's kind of a disappointing answer. But there's a mix of factors that help to build that sort of momentum, that parade that we've talked about in the past, right? And one of those things, I heard it in the conversation earlier, and I want to hone in on it for a second because I think it's really important. And it's about framing the conversation, right? Both yourself and Chris were talking about, when we start framing questions differently, people start to answer differently. And I'd actually take that a step further. If we look at how people have been answering polls around climate change and around the warming climate specifically, right? They're getting there. The numbers are in the majority, but they're not amazing. They're not super impressive. If you look at a poll that asks folks, do you think that the hot weather right now is because of climate change? The numbers are actually much higher. So what that tells me is that, we're dealing with regular human behavior and human thinking here. And it's that we're really reactive, right? We think about what's in front of us. We're not generally proactive. We're not primed to be, big picture thinkers, although there's the odd individual that is, possibly some of you in this phone call, and it's why you're here, right? We're kind of strange, those of us that try to think proactively and think about solutions and in the future, right? And so when we reframe things, not only to positive questions, but we also bring it to what people care about right in front of them in that moment. Hey, the climate is hot right now. Do you feel that the weather is increasing? That's something that they feel right now, today. It's in front of them. And so when we actually start appealing to people in their everyday lives and showing them the impacts of these, big picture problems, but to them personally, we actually start making some movements there in their own thinking. So to bring that back to the original question, right? What could we start doing? We need to start reframing questions, but also bringing all of those issues to people's everyday lives, right? Making them tangible right in front of them. That's where municipal politics is fantastic, right? Because it's really tangible. The solutions and the politics is right in front of you. It's things that are, literally the water you drink, the sidewalks you step on, Brett, everything that you've been talking about, a lot of it is municipal. But then how do we take that a step further? What can we do today? I think one thing is look at what sort of structures are around you and try not to be too afraid to be bold when it comes to campaigning. So what do I mean by that? For example, there's a bit of a chill from the Harper era when it comes to organizations being a bit more political or doing advocacy work. And so if you find yourself being a part of perhaps a business or a charity that has resources and power, maybe a voice, a reputation, some kind of network connections, think about how you can leverage those to do some advocacy work. I think a lot of it is, what's the word here? It's kind of dependent on a misconception that advocacy and political work is partisan. And nothing could be further from the truth, right? Everything that we've been talking about today here is political. There's no way around it. Everything's political. So I think if you can do as an individual a bit of an analysis of the resources, you're standing around a business or an organization, your own network connections, and just do a bit of an analysis of like, what do I have at my disposal where I could start to plug in and do some advocacy work? Maybe we can pay folks to, start canvassing on some of these issues. It's not all partisan. It can absolutely be political in a way that will start to move the needle in the right direction.
Yeah, certainly with the for the Calgary Climate Hub, we have to remain totally nonpartisan, and that means that but the flip side of that is we are allowed to advocate for policy, and so that's what we end up doing. And we will be doing when the provincial election starts to fire up, we'll be doing some work on that, but from a very carefully positioned place. That's the only way you can do it. Next question I want to ask to Tana, but all of you can think about what you want to say here. Tana, Tana, you've got your current role with POW, and you're in a methane reduction business that I'd like to know a whole lot more about. But you've also run for office in the past, and you and I have been talking for years about climate, specifically here in Calgary, and even I would say you and I have been sitting across the table from one another, having a beer, and knowing most of what Chris's report is telling us is not that surprising to us. We've always sort of talked about there's just going to be this opportunity here. It's going to be a stimulus. It's going to be something that benefits Calgary specifically and Alberta. I guess the big question I have is with your knowledge of this city and the people in it, how far are we away from leadership on this and prospering on this, and what do we need to do next? Because like for myself, when I talk about Calgary becoming a leader on climate, that's what Calgarians have told us they want. And so far I feel like with the work that's been done at City Council, I'm happy about what has gone through. I'm less happy about other things, and I'm not sure if we're in a leadership position yet. I feel like we are in a catching up position to other cities. I don't think we're blowing anybody's hair back in other cities about, whoa, look at what Calgary's doing. But what do you think that we should be doing if we really truly want to lead and prosper in this city?
Jeez, that's just such a tough question. Your question about how my summer is going is way easier than that. Wow. I guess a little bit of background for those kind of listening in, maybe now or in the future. I'm part of Protect Our Winters, trying to really help advocate and get people that are outdoor enthusiasts to care about where they play, and also to be strong advocates for climate and obviously the changing environment that's going to be really affecting all those outdoor folks here. But my background is in environmental engineering, as well as more specifically in methane reduction right now. Amongst many things. Also working on a documentary. Got to give myself a shout out for that. Cool. That will include Alberta and sensitive areas here, sensitive environments in Alberta, and how it's affected by climate change. I think segueing on to the leadership that we need here and where we're at, especially in Calgary and beyond here, I think it really comes down to the people at the end of the day now, and obviously our voters and whatnot. And what really has got me thinking over the past year outside of my political endeavors and kind of being front facing and whatnot is getting back to the roots of why people think the way they do. And I'm starting to really understand now that, hey, campaigns are great. We need people like Romy doing her thing. We need people like Tim getting out there. We need people like Brett. We need, hey, Chris, you're doing an awesome job on getting these stats together and showing us the data. But also we really need people to understand what drives them every day and what connects them to the things that we're telling them about. And this is where I think my endeavors right now with Protect Our Winters has been so amazing, because over the COVID period here, over the past 2 years, we're seeing a significant increase in people going outdoors finally, right? And actually starting to explore a little bit and reconnect and doing that safely, right, outdoors. And having done this, now people are finally seeing, hey, things are affected. We love nature. We're seeing things change. We want to be a part of this movement a little bit more and the change. And we're seeing a lot of people wanting to get involved with local groups and whatnot. And now I think just through that just a simple steps of just going outside and being in nature, people are starting to see that. So I think some of that leadership has to also stem from us saying, hey, come connect with us outside a little bit and see why, this is important to all of us. but also showing proper images and things like social media, videos. All of that also has to show nature and ourselves, seeing ourselves, and the diversity of people actually getting involved in these things have to be a big prevalence in this as well, right? And I think there's a lot more focus in that now. When we look at MEC, for example, all the leadership, all the social media that they're doing is showing diversity in all sorts of different ways. And I think if we see that also in leadership, there's going to be more people wanting to get involved. And I think that we are seeing now in Alberta and across Canada a little bit more slowly. But I think people are leading the way. I really do. And I think it's people like us here on the call that have to step it up even further, even though we're at the max. I'm sure a lot of us are. But I think if we continue, people will follow. And I thank you all for your services throughout the year for this. So it's been awesome.
Hey, Tana, I was thinking about, protect our winters and save the mountain, the against the coals, the coal expansion effort that went on, the enormous work that went there. You must see a lot of overlap between those groups, I feel like, right?
Definitely. We were definitely a part of the whole coal mining efforts there, and making sure that we protect those areas right around here. And we've overlapped with CPAWS as well. And, we definitely make sure that our campaigns are aligned and how we can pool our resources to kind of work with the people on the ground here. Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll segue into Tim then from there. Tim, how do we get the message out to people that may feel like they're sort of ideologically opposed to anything climate? How do we sell this message that, look, there's money and jobs here, for example? How do we help make that get rid of some of that opposition?
I think it's about asking lots of questions. I like what Romy said about asking reframing questions, and also just Tana's description of leadership as being inspired. I think one of the questions we can ask, I'd love to just explore here in this space, is we in some ways had a huge social change experiment happen over the last 2.5 years.
Yeah.
In terms of COVID-19. And the level of complexity required to solve that is a fraction of what we actually really need to make action on climate change. So I think we could do a great retrospective looking back on how different forms of influence were effective or ineffective on COVID-19 as a whole, and how a huge change like that moved through the system of society. My background, I know a lot of people who didn't get the vaccine, and I know a lot of people who don't believe in climate change. And I think there's a lot more questions you need to ask about why they think that way. What are the driving forces for them?
Yeah. It's. I mean, I think it's eventually the numbers are shifting enough so that, I always feel like the Smoky Summers gets rid of, X amount of denialists every time we get one coming around. I do think it just gets harder and harder for folks to deny that. But they got to come along too in their own way, I guess. Well, I guess, if anybody has anything else they want to say about, what they think it takes for Calgary to lead or prosper, or where you think there's a real opportunity for us, then, as I mentioned to Chris earlier, I feel like, like building retrofits means jobs, means construction jobs, right? And all of this stuff is going to need engineering and design work and entrepreneurs and investors and commerce, and so I feel like we may be able to finally get past this point where we're doing the right thing because it's the right thing, because that hasn't got us where we need to be. We're now able to do the right thing because it's also prosperous, and it also we just got to make sure we bring everybody along with us, I guess. All right. Well, maybe we'll leave it there for now, unless anybody has anything they want to say on that front. I want to, go ahead there, Chris.
Yeah, Steve, maybe I'll just touch on just one thing. And I think what I think maybe just on your last little comments there, I think the risk to certain industries and to the community at large, I think becomes a little bit bigger. So I think that brings some people's attention. And one of the ways I think about that is just in talent, right? So when we think about future talent, I mentioned it in the presentation quickly there about having the workforce that's required in some of those energy transition subsectors. Because if you don't have the talent, some of those businesses and investments are going to go somewhere else. So it's something our organization thinks about a lot. But I want to share just like a quick insight from a Canada West Foundation report, and maybe some people on the call read it. It's called Work to Live. But the key insight there was the link between social identity and place, as that came up in one of their focus groups. And it was really where like the recognition that for most people where they live is not just a place, but an extension of their own identity. So when we think about Calgary, or certainly when I think about Calgary, I think, how do we build that community that our future talent wants to be a part of? And so I think, wrapping it back into kind of a more optimistic space, the fact that we've been laggards, I think, gives us an opportunity to be a really fast follower in Calgary. Right. So we hit average at best, in my view, but it was really important to hit net zero and get a climate strategy passed. There's a lot of real work to be done in 2023, but hopefully we can, look to other jurisdictions. I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel, and we can adopt some of those or tweak them for Calgary and really get up into that kind of top tier, or maybe that leadership pack. Because we certainly have, the value proposition, the bench strength, a lot of the, I think, key attributes that put us in that, top 30 clean tech ecosystem out of 280 cities. So it's like we have the right to win. It's just, will we be able to achieve it or not? So I want to close with that.
Yeah. And, that gives me a chance to mention the great work being done by Climate Reality Canada, specifically when it comes to those other jurisdictions. So they've got, they publish a yearly report called the National Climate League. And what I would say to everybody on this panel and to anybody listening anywhere, if you tell me you want a copy of this, I will get a copy into your hands. But what it does is it talks about a whole bunch of different, areas of climate. And then it talks about, this is the city in Canada that's leading on this area, and this is why. And then it also provides an example of, Luxembourg is doing this on, tree canopy. And so, you're able to really see that, like, and I mean, it does show you, this is where Calgary's rated. This is where, this is where we fit in Canada's big cities. So that's the National Climate League by Climate Reality Canada. And like I said, I'm happy to put that into whoever's hands that I can. I think it's valuable for people to be able to make those comparisons to other jurisdictions. And, I like what you're saying about, communities seeing the advantage versus the risk. And, so it feels like we're able to provide it's a carrot versus stick thing. And so I don't know, maybe Romy knows when it comes to campaigns whether carrot versus stick is a good way to try to convince people or not. I don't know, but that it's something that leaps to mind anyways. Okay, I think I'll close that off there for now. I appreciate all of you for coming on, and certainly when I look at who we have assembled here, I see people that care about this city and that show leadership and speak out about what they think should happen, and keep on doing it, and I'll be right there with you. But what I was saying earlier to Chris, I say to the whole panel, in many ways, we're on a quest in the same direction here, and we should be thinking about how we can slay that dragon together. Okay, so that's it for now. Thanks once again to all of our guests. I want to thank all the volunteers that helped make this happen. Specifically want to thank the Calgary Climate Hub Board, as well as my producer, Vivian Elzinga. Good night for now, and let's get to work. Thanks again, panel. We'll talk soon.